Thank you. Dear friends, collaborators, competitors, partners, dear hub mates, as we work to address this issue of Arctic hubs, I think it's important to recognize the component pieces. Yes, there will be friends, there will be collaborators, there will be competitors, and there will be partners. And each of these, and together, they will foster the Arctic excellence that relates back to the title of this session. Thank you for your consideration of a blue future. Decision makers in Alaska and the public more broadly still ask what the blue economy is. We have here a good example of catchy terminology that is ahead of its base. I'm thinking that a good acronym will help. Something like basically leveraging underwater everything. Depends on how you spell blue, but basically it works. We can change basically to brilliantly as it becomes more widespread. But basically that's what we're talking about. Important in my mind is the leveraging part. The traditional blue economy is the highest private sector employer in Alaska. The traditional blue economy ensures that 90% of the goods that come to the state, from fuel to frozen pizza, arrive on time and safely. Alaska has a sustainably managed and healthy wild fisheries alongside an active maritime transportation sector and a healthy oil and gas sector. Furthermore, Alaska's indigenous peoples depend on the ocean for much of their subsistence harvest and especially their marine mammal harvest. It is the marine highway that is the lifeblood of much of Alaska. Alaska's communications, its pipelines, and its export depend on a blue economy. The traditional blue economy is a strong sector within Alaska and across the Arctic. It is overlooked where citizens aren't directly engaged in it, an invisible and assumed asset that receives little attention outside the sector. For those whose lives and livelihoods depend on it, it is everything. So why the recent and increasing attention to a blue economy? What is new about the new blue economy, and why should it matter to the Arctic? The fact that it is 1.5 trillion as part of the global economy, the fact that that number should double by 2030, that 3 trillion of the global economy will depend on the blue economy, is probably part of the answer. The new blue economy leverages tradition and adds value. Blue economy, in my mind, is embedded in how we as a region approach sustainable development. As Arctic nations work to meet their COP21 goals and embrace policy decisions that emphasize a lower carbon economy, blue makes sense. Blue plus green makes even more sense. I guess teal or cyan is the sweet spot. But these two together and separately may help to define the Arctic region in the coming decades. We can imagine an Arctic in 2030, 2050 that is significant not for its oil and gas resources or its ports or its icebreakers, but by its ability to leverage its ocean resources. A blue and green economy have the potential to be economically robust, environmentally sound, socially responsible, and culturally responsive. Still to be determined, the economics. How do we leverage the current capacity and develop further the competency to fully take advantage of our blue economy? Where is the market for blue resources? And do Arctic nations have easy access? Who is our competition, and how can Arctic regions collaborate for mutual benefit? Finally, whose economy? Is it a local economy? Is it a subnational economy? Is it the national economy? Are the mechanisms in place for each of those to benefit? Still to be determined is the environment. What is the status of vulnerability assessments in the region? And how do conservation efforts impact blue growth? Are there clearly defined sustainable practices that mitigate harm to the environment? Still to be determined is society. Are there regulatory and fiscal systems in place to ensure that Northerners capture the bulk of blue benefits? What kinds of infrastructure needs to be in place to help in this? Still to be determined is culture. To the extent that Indigenous self-determination includes Blue interests, what are the mechanisms for encouraging that participation? What are the opportunities for Indigenous-led approaches? I know that it's not helpful just to ask questions, but that I should come with some idea of solutions as well. I will at least offer some commentary as a path towards solutions. We should let isolated incidents of innovation inspire us, but not let them determine our overall goal of broad regional Blue development. Consider all of the examples of private industry currently engaged in the Blue economy as part of a tapestry that together we have work in front of us. The majority of Alaska's Blue assets currently are owned by firms from outside the state. It will require a substantial level of investment and an intentional shift in policy to focus on homegrown capacity building. Reconfiguring brown infrastructure and intellectual capital is one path to leveraging the Blue economy. Anticipating change will be critical. Ocean acidification will threaten Blue health. Migration of species will mean that planning must always be future-focused and anticipatory. Markets might be south, but opportunity is north. We have to reconfigure societal perceptions to focus on the Arctic and its potential. We have to have in place the necessary safeguards to protect the health of that ocean, including the potential for marine protected areas where they are critical, informed by vulnerability assessments, and all the forms of knowledge. We have to co-produce Blue knowledge with Indigenous peoples living in the region, to connect Blue to green, and both of those to technological innovation. Finally, we have to address the graying of the fleet and the greening of the fleet as well. I feel like there are a lot of colors involved in this discussion. Do we have a plan to get there? Not at the national level necessarily, or at least not in all 8 Arctic nations. Norway released its ocean strategy in the last year. Iceland's Ocean Cluster Initiative has been an excellent addition to that innovation and ecosystem. It was great to hear of the Faroe Islands' progress in developing legislation. But we still have work to do. These provide good examples of ways in which northern regions can begin to articulate their priorities and a path forward. I don't believe that as many Arctic nations have this articulated well enough at a domestic level, but that in cooperation we can describe a pan-Arctic approach. I would suggest that as part of this approach, the Arctic Council better engage in Blue economic questions. Here again, Blue growth is embedded within a sustainable development ethic. We have a chance to share best practices, learn from the lessons of others, including those from outside of the region, and anticipate and address the barriers to Blue development. Ultimately, the growth of the Blue economy will depend on the health of the resources, the innovative capacity of Northerners, and the stability and interest of the market. Moreover, our Blue future must be responsive to and help to address global challenges, including climate change, food and water security, population growth, and migration. A Blue Arctic will be defined not just by Blue economy, but by a Blue society that builds on us as children of the sea, and that embraces these concepts of sustainability and opportunity and interconnectedness. Thank you.